that we'll proceed through the cycle, and looking forward to Jim joining, next April, assuming we're back on the, on the normal cycle. And it's really, in my 2+ years on the board, it's just been a real pleasure. All 6 select men and women that I've dealt with, they all come with different perspectives and different views, and we have really pulled together and come to consensus, and I think served the town really well. So Jim, I'd like to welcome you on board. So I guess our next our first order of business would be the public hearing which I'll read the notice. The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on July 6, 2020 at 7 p.m. virtually on the application of Claire Properties for a site plan special permit under zoning bylaw section 10.4 at 50 Nagog Park. For information how to participate remotely, https://zoom.us/.i//5039 18785, and to view the application materials, http://mass.gov/dsweb/collection232. So who will be presenting on behalf of the applicant?
Hi, this is Jeff Checkaway. Steve Hvac is with R.J. O'Connell and Associates. He'll be presenting, but also Lou Levine was our analyst. I'm wondering if we could get him added.
Sorry, what's his name?
Lou Levine, Levine.
Yeah, oh, I know. I just didn't hear it. I know, and I will. So he's on his way.
And my name is Jeff Checkaway. I'm with Claire Properties. I'm their VP of Construction, and we'll be kind of here to field any questions that may come up related to that as well.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, Lou.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. This is site plan at 50 Nagog Park. As Jeff mentioned, from the applicant is Jeff Buckley. Tim Collisley will be able to get on, and the engineer is Steve Hvac. There's an existing building that can purchase and replace it with a new building. The previous building, or the present building, to be demolished was used for office space. The proposed building is intended to be used for warehousing. The proposed building is about the same size, but slightly smaller than the previous building. I think at this point, I would ask Steve just to briefly go through the site plan. I would just parenthetically say that pre-COVID, we met with staff many months ago, went over the proposal. Staff was very helpful. Site plan was developed accordingly. There have been comments from planning and to the peer review, which we responded to and I believe are under control. There's no major issues. So, Steve, why don't you just explain the site plan briefly?
Oh, will do. Again, Steve Hvac from R.J. O'Connell and Associates, with the civil engineers on the project. As Lou mentioned, essentially the proposal on the 11.47 acre site is to demolish a 3-story building, approximately 124,000 square feet, which again has office space and associated 434 parking spaces, and construct 110,000 single-story warehouse building. So again, there is a reduction of that. The proposed warehouse use has a low parking requirement, and we're proposing 86 parking spaces for that. And those will be on the west and south sides of the site. The loading will be behind the building, facing away from Nagog Park. Access will be from 2 driveways along Nagog Park, and it somewhat mirrors the condition that exists today, except that we're going to move the southerly driveway further south and the northerly driveway further north, in an effort to provide more separation between the driveways, which helps out with sight lines and so forth. Beyond that, we are going to provide a comprehensive and complementary landscape. Oh, there we go. Someone's sharing the site plan. Okay, that's the existing. Beyond that, we're going to include a comprehensive landscape plan, which will help screen the neighboring properties and also enhance the look of the site. We're also going to provide a comprehensive stormwater plan, which will help mitigate stormwater flows. I won't get into detail because it'll bore you all to tears. Additionally, utilities will be provided from Nagog Park, and we plan on installing a water line loop and gas service, electric service, and so forth. And we'll have a new sanitary system. It's important to note there will be a reduction in sanitary flows, again, going from an office use to a warehouse use. In a similar fashion, traffic will be projected to be much less than it is currently, again, with the use going from office to warehouse. So it's a relatively simple proposal. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to elaborate on any aspect of the project.
Questions or comments from members of the board? Jim.
Hi. So it seemed like the third-party peer review came in very recently, I think on the 2nd of July. So that raised a bunch of technical issues that we haven't heard a response from either the planning department or from the applicant. So I'm wanting to hear before we close the hearing at this meeting or some future meeting responses to the issues that were raised in the third-party review.
Sure, we did receive. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We did receive the comments. We reviewed over the weekend and then had further discussion today, and went through the comments one by one. The applicant is willing to address the comments contained therein. Several of them mirrored town staff comments, and we've certainly we'll take those into consideration. But essentially, there's nothing that I would call a showstopper or anything that the applicant can't work to address.
Steve, why don't you just address them, overview the comments that, so the board can get an idea that we can address them or will address them?
Sure. Quite simply, Michael Carter did a very, from GCG Associates, did a very thorough review. And at the top of his review, I don't know if anyone had a chance to see it, he summarizes the comments, which I think will be helpful to go through in that fashion rather than comment by comment. First, he notes that the parking lot should comply with section 6.71 with a 30-foot separation between the parking lot cells. Currently, we have about 20 feet, so we plan to remove a space and lengthen that out to address the parking cell issue. It's a relatively simple fix and does not really impact the site much at all. He noted that we have a future parking area shown on the site, and he'd like to see the specific layout for that. And again, that's a relatively simple thing to show. We certainly have it planned. We didn't think to add the detail to the plan because we thought it would be cumbersome. But again, very easily addressed. He also mentions the site driveways, and he'd like to see a sight line distance shown on the plans. Again, we've greatly increased the width between the two driveways, so it should only be a safer condition from what exists today. The stormwater analysis, the management design system rather, he did review it. He said it meets the requirements. There's some technical, what I call happy to glad comments, some clarifications we need to make on the plans, but nothing that changes the nature of the design at all in any substantial way, or any way at all for that matter. He mentioned the sewer pipe. He believes the sewer design is oversized, and that's a very easy fix. Again, it's a technical issue, and that's a very simple fix for us to refine the plan for that. Then, interestingly enough, he mentioned the trip generation, and we erred on the side of being conservative, and we actually used manufacturing and general office use, which gives you a higher generation, and we were trying to cover all cases. He noted, based on the design of the plan, that we should use the warehouse code. So when you do that, you in fact have a lower trip generation. We're happy to do that calculation, but again, we thought our more conservative approach was the best way to approach that, to make sure we were covered in all cases and had a safe level of understanding of the traffic, rather. The next comment, number 7. He said there appears to be a bordering vegetated wetland located, and this is on the west side. Interestingly enough, when we met with town staff, as Lou mentioned, we met with town staff back on February 5th, and we talked with Natural Resources Director, Mr. Tideman. And we talked about this resource area, and we suggested perhaps a site meeting may be beneficial. Upon review of the information, we submitted several pieces of supporting documentation showing that we believe that it is in fact a drainage system, not a wetland per se. So we sent that information off, but because of the COVID situation, we were able to coordinate and have an actual site visit on that. So, we did want to address our opinion on the matter, but we haven't had a chance, again, to coordinate directly with Natural Resources, again, because of this unfortunate COVID issue. And finally, the final summary comment is that the project, because of its size, requires what they call a Nippies permit, which is a general stormwater permit. We apply for these all the time. You just simply send a notification on behalf of the applicant for the project. Very simple. If you'd like, I can go through comment by comment, but again, it's what I call basically happy to glad comments. Just change the name of this or relabel that type of thing for the most part.
Steve, there was an email very late in the day from Roland that kind of discussed these comments and kind of where he thought he was. You
Yes,
have that in front of
I do. Yeah, I have that in front of me. In fact, I responded again at a very late hour. Responded to Roland my thoughts on that. I could certainly discuss his three concerns. I guess I'd call that lingering out there. The first is related to the bicycle parking. He just wanted to make sure it complies, and we show bicycle parking per the peer review agent. He asked engineer rather. He asked that we provide additional detail. And we can certainly do that to show that they comply with the standards. And we'll make sure we refine that to ensure that it does. He mentioned specifically, Roland, mentioned specifically that the driveway widths, there's a 24-foot max. We're proposing 30 feet. and the reason we are is for maneuverability. He asked us to revisit that and said it's not really for convenience or ease of truck maneuvering, but rather one of safety to have a narrower driveway. So we'll rerun our templates. We've already analyzed them once, but we'll rerun those and see if we can make the driveway a little bit narrower. But again, we're trying to alleviate any issues with trucks coming in and out of the site. But again, we're certainly happy to comply and look at those, to further investigate those. And the final comment, there was, I think that our response to the initial memo may have been worded in a way that left it open here, but he had a question about the open space, and I wanted to clarify that when we did our open space calculation, we in fact assumed a full build out of the future parking as well to make sure we were compliant. And that was a little unclear in our response. So with the full build out, our project will meet the minimum open space requirements per the zoning bylaw. So those were the three comments that Roland had. And again, similar to the peer review comments, the applicant has agreed that we'll make sure we address all the outstanding comments.
Address to the board. Address means that the plans will be corrected. I think in Roland's email tonight and his previous email, he believed that if the board was inclined to go forward, that these could all be dealt with as conditions of approval and prior to the issuance of a building permit. And I would suggest that they're, as Steve indicated, they're all, things we're going to do. They're empirical, and prior to issuing a building permit, staff peer review can check them off that we've done. The peer review came in very late. It came in Thursday evening. And the meeting was today, so we would have amended the plans, if the meeting would have been later. But that's kind of where we are.
Dean?
Yeah, I was assigned this plan, so I've delved into it a little bit more deeply than some of the others. I did attend a meeting of the Design Review Board, and they looked at it. They didn't have a lot of comments about it. One of the concerns is that, it looks like, I believe there's a large number of bays at the rear of the building. So they raised that as an issue, like, what might the building be used for at some future time? And it goes to the question which was discussed by Roland as zoning enforcement officer about the distinction between a distribution center, which is not allowed in that district, and a warehouse. So I just want to let everyone know that we have certainly explored that. This is supposed to be a warehouse. I did have a conversation with Attorney Levine about that. So we all know right from the beginning that this is a warehouse situation, not a distribution center. So it's, for instance, it's not going to be an Amazon distribution center or something like that with a huge amount of daily traffic in and out. They had some other, DRB also had some other minor questions about some of the perimeter landscaping, but I think those can probably be addressed in the final plans.
Yes.
And I did see a note coming across from Chris Allen regarding a proposal to loop a water line. If I could have some explanation of that.
Sure. Essentially, the intent is to take the water service from Nagog and loop it around the building so that we can provide a continual loop and maintain adequate pressures. From that water line, we'll have a domestic service and a fire service for the building, and also hydrants located per the fire code around the building to ensure that there's enough pressure. And that line will essentially come up one driveway in the south, go around the back of the site, and come out the driveway to the north, thus creating a loop, which, in technical terms, it provides a much better redundancy in the way of pressures to serve the building.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions, comments from the board? David?
Nothing for me.
Joan?
Well said.
Back to Jim.
Thanks. So one of the things that we need to do is to certify that this meets various conditions in the special permit program, and one of them is adherence to the master plan. So I had a question for my fellow board members, since I'm new here. Two questions really. One is if there's concern that, well, an office building is the kind of building that could potentially be changed to housing use that's allowed in this district, and it's already got elevators. It's a good setup for having apartments. A warehouse is clearly not so easy to turn into housing. So I just wanted to, since we do have housing goals in our master plan, I just want to make sure that the board was had any concern about that. The other question I had for the fellow board members was, it seems like going from a 3-story building to a 1-story building is going to eventually result in a lower assessed value, reducing tax income to the town. And another one of our master plan goals is fiscal responsibility, and making sure that we encourage the kind of commercial development that brings in revenue to the town. So I guess I also wanted to hear from the board members about whether that was a concern. Thanks.
Can I respond to both of those?
Sure, Luke.
It's up to the chair.
Sure, Luke, go ahead.
Okay, with respect to the latter issue, is this building was foreclosed upon. I can't attest to what the town has been doing for assessments, but I hope that the prior owner, maybe someone else from the applicant, knows. The building was foreclosed. It was empty. There was no income coming in, and so when there's no income coming in, the assessment is reduced. Or should be reduced if you apply for an abatement substantially. So right now, the intention is to make it a functional building. Office space was not something that people wanted in this location, and the replacement purpose, warehousing, is deemed to be a much more financial, appropriate, economic proposal. So, and that's in terms of the fiscal end of it, together with, any other revenues it would support, which the other building that got foreclosed wasn't. Secondly, with respect to the master plan, this is a permitted use in this district. It's not subject to special permit. I submitted materials to Roland, answered several questions, making sure that the town understood and the applicant understood this was only going to be used for warehousing. It wasn't going to be used as a distribution center. We understand the restrictions. Roland, as the zoning enforcement officer, wrote back a very lengthy, detailed analysis, agreeing that it, as described and as limited in our letter, was in fact a warehouse as proposed. And so I think in terms of the master plan, if you have a use that's permitted, and we have made sure that we have qualified the use so it is permitted and restricted it, I find it difficult to have an issue with the master plan. Additionally, with respect to housing, Mr. Grant, that the building is going to be demolished, and retrofitting a building that's an office building for even if that was a choice to housing is probably, or in fact, economically not viable. I mean, the fact that you have some elevators and you're then going to convert it to housing, it's a whole different structural layout, fire code requirements, kitchens, bathrooms, sewer capacity, etc. So I would suggest that because we have an allowable use, we're conformed to that use in detail, submitted that to the town, approved by the zoning inspector. I would suggest that this, definitely complies as a matter of, as a given with the master plan. But I do appreciate your comments.
Dean?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Lou on a number of these points. I'd also add one more in regards to housing, and certainly housing is important. However, the board has been reluctant to try to force a great deal of housing in one particular neighborhood, and where there is a very large housing development further up the hill at Avalon. I'm not sure they want to load up that much, even if it was financially viable to convert that office building into a residential structure. And again, I'm sure one of the things that I see could be a major stumbling block would be the septic capacity of the building. If it was designed for an office building and then you're going to put residents into it, that would be quite an engineering feat, I think. So I think it's a good point. But I do think I'll certainly agree that the whole idea behind having financially viable commercial build is very important in this area as well. So I'm looking at this as a positive outcome to start to, certainly not going to have huge numbers of employees in the warehouse, but at least you got something in there. You've got the town will be getting some tax revenues, and perhaps the people who work there are going to be using some of the shops and restaurants in the neighborhood. So I think that makes it compliant with the goals of the master plan.
Yeah, with all the empty buildings in town that are commercial, I'm very much in favor of this applicant.
Chris Allen typed in a message to us about the 10-inch water loop was that it would present a problem. Jim, did you pick that up?
Sure. I'd be happy to read it and ask it as a question if that's helpful. So a 10-inch loop is going to create a water quality problem. Stagnant water will have a high water age and will be a potential breeding ground for bacteria. I recommend a single supply line for fire and domestic, and there are existing hydrants on Nagog Park Drive.
Can I just,
I can address this too if needed.
Go ahead.
Which one of you?
Jeff, check it
First. Jeff, go ahead.
So we'd be open to a single supply line. The reason we're showing it as a loop is for a warehouse use. We typically see that it will be a closed loop with a separate, backflow, a check valve or a double check valve, in order to give us the maximum amount of sprinkler capacity. When you're dealing with a warehouse with a 30-foot clear building, you typically see racking that would require higher density. So using a fire pump system on a closed loop with a single feed in can help us increase our sprinkler capacity. But if that's not needed based on the tenants and the use that we end up with, we'd be open to a single feed.
Can
Luke?
Please.
Please.
Can the condition of the permit be that we will resolve this issue with the water department, which we would have had to resolve anyway? I mean, this is a water condition, so we would be happy to sit down with Chris in the water department and water district and go through it. And if it's be a single line, like Jeff said, it'll be a single line. And if they have some other alternatives, I think, but it's up to the water district, and the selectmen can condition special permit site plan approval on the water layout being subject to water district approval, which it would be anyway.
Jim, did you have any further questions or comments?
No, just curious to hear from any of the other selectmen about this question about adherence.
I think any other board members wish to weigh in with questions or comments? For the public, David, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that we have at this point a comprehensive list of conditions, right, that we could distill at this meeting. We have the comments from staff and things like that, but I don't think we can easily assemble a list of conditions at this meeting. I mean, I don't see anything in this application that gives me pause, so or to turn that around, I'm in favor of it. But if we're going to put conditions on it, we don't have a comprehensive list, and I think we might need maybe close the hearing, and then actually take our vote in a subsequent meeting. There are also, by the way, John, a couple people who would like to speak.
Sure.
At the hearing. So whenever you're ready.
Sure, please. Let's open it to public comment.
Okay, go ahead, Tara, please.
This is Tara Hvac. I've got a couple questions and then some comments. First of all, Roland's name was mentioned. I thought he retired.
John?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thank you.
So he's an employee still, or is he?
Yes.
Did he?
He has not retired.
Okay, I thought he announced his retirement. It's July 28th. All right. I noticed a while back that if I remember correctly, the site plan special permit rules and regulations were requiring peer review. Is that correct? Either way, I have noticed a lot of peer review lately, and I really like that, and I hope that continues. So I guess that's not a question. Relative to, it seems as though the applicant wants you to approve this tonight without seeing the conditions and draft permit. And I thought Peter Berry made a great speech not too long ago during the fire station about how he didn't want to approve these things without seeing a draft permit. And I think that's a good practice, especially coming from a municipal lawyer. And I hope that you agree with that and don't approve without seeing these things. Because if they aren't showstoppers, then there should be no reason why we can't wait to see everything in writing and see staff memos that say, we've looked at this and we're fine. Right now, there seems to be a lot of outstanding things. Let's see. The expected change in taxes, assessed value can be reduced. I didn't realize that if you have lack of income, you could get your assessed value reduced. I don't think that's the case. Foreclosure doesn't reduce the taxes unless the building is falling down. And even then, I think that there's a case for demolition by neglect. But nonetheless, I feel like we should be looking at the change in use and when it's a special permit, because somebody said, well, it meets all the needs, so we don't really even need this and it should get approved or whatever. But the point is that you are here. It is a special permit, and that is the reason why you're here. And I think that that's an important thing to keep in our minds. I'm so unfortunate that nobody mentioned the gas line, if this is new service, relative to how much more or less gas would be used. And I want to make sure that I actually heard what I thought I heard, that the water and the number of parking spaces or the number of cars would reduce. I'd like that answered. And relative to economic development, I'd like to know how the applicant found this building, whether the town helped with that at all, because there's a big effort to increase the percentage of taxes coming from commercial. At least I hope there is still. And so if we have an economic development director that we've invested in, whether or not that has paid off, whether you've, even if it'll reduce taxes, I think it's still good to keep businesses in business. And then my last question is the materials from raising the building, where will the materials go? Thank you.
Lou?
Well,
Or Jeff?
Jeff, why don't you comment on how you became aware of the building and where the materials will go? I can deal with the rest.
So as far as the materials go, they'll likely be hauled off to our demo contractor's preferred location for disposal. We're not planning on leaving really anything on site. We may process the concrete slabs and foundations if we see that as a viable use for a sub-base for the new building if it's approved. But all the other building materials and everything will be disposed of. I'll let Tim weigh in on the acquisition portion of the property. He's more in line to handle that question.
Hey guys, this is Tim Kellis from Claire Properties. I work with Todd Barkley in our office on acquisitions primarily for our company. We became aware of this building. It was a widely marketed building from JLL. And we purchased it with the awareness that the tenant was going to be leaving and vacating the building within 6 month to 1 year period. And they vacated it back in June. But it was a fully marketed building, sent out to kind of all of the Boston and New England landlords in the area.
With respect to the economics, I just disagree with Tara. It's not the first time in my career that I've disagreed. Probably won't be the last. If the economics of the building, the rent, is, a form is sent out with every commercial property. If you don't send it back in, then you have to accept the town's assessment. But if you send it back in and show them that your rents are very low or non-existent, then obviously the assessors take it into consideration. Potentially to save some time here, I disagree. I agree with David Martin's comment that there are a bunch of issues that the board should look at as conditions. And what I would suggest, if that's going to kind of limit the discussion going forward, is that you continue the meeting, for whatever the next appropriate time is. In the interim, we can address the conditions and either have them eliminated, and a draft decision can be prepared by staff as to what still is open. And assumingly, those would be conditions that would be appropriately resolved subsequent to the site plan approval in the normal order. This is site plan approval special permit. It's not special permit for a use. All commercial development in Acton is site plan special permit approval. The length and breadth of that is a little bit different than for a use, substantially. But that being said, just point out that we would be happy to let the board continue it, leave the hearing open so we can comment on conditions. You can close the hearing at the next meeting. I think we can resolve most of the conditions with staff, revise plans, get them back to peer review, get them back to the planning department, get them back to Roland before he retires. Tara mentioned he was retiring on July 28th, and I just checked my calendar, and today is July 6th, so I guess we're consistent with Roland hasn't retired. So we can resolve this between now and the next meeting, and I would agree with David, and I think some of the other comments from the board members that are going to follow, that you'd be more comfortable looking at a draft with conditions that either were resolved or that you know what you're conditioning upon. And that came originally from Peter Berry. I think it is a good way to proceed rather than just a blank slate.
Sure. Are there any further public comments?
Yes, there are a couple. Just so everybody knows, though, if please put your if I don't know you, you need to put your full name and street in the chat. And if your hand is raised, then I'll call on you. If I don't recognize you, then I'm not going to call on you. Unfortunately, we sometimes have Zoom bombers say vulgar things, and so I need to know who you are and where you live. Okay, Barry, please go ahead, unmute yourself.
Thanks, David. Hi, Lou. Haven't spoken to you since we discussed Bonneville, the water district. Good to see you again. Anyway, I mostly have questions because David actually addressed some of my thoughts. I gather now from the discussion that the developer is planning to do on-site septage rather than attempt a connection to the sewer system, the Hvac sewer system. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. We plan on tying in to the existing sewer.
You're not gonna have on-site disposal. You're gonna tie into to the NAGOG plant.
That's correct.
Okay, so, and you've addressed that with them, and they still have the capacity.
Correct. We don't plan to exceed the capacity that was previously used by the office building that is being torn down.
Okay, because that plant is close to capacity. Since well, I won't go into the history. By the way, I'm speaking as a private citizen, not as an elected official. I guess the town is aware, and I guess you guys were aware that there's going to be the building substantially increases the footprint, and therefore substantially increases the impervious surface of that parcel, way above what it was, because the building footprint is no longer up, it's out. So that increases the impervious surface along with the parking. So I did a quick calculation, it's a substantial increase, but it looks like you realize that invokes Chapter X. And so you're going to deal with BMPs for the stormwater. Because it is such a large project, I think, and Chapter X is administered by engineering, but I also think it will kick in Chapter U because of the discharges that potentially can come from that site during the construction phase. That could enter the MS4, and that's administered by the Board of Health. So I don't know if that's been discussed or if anybody has addressed that with them. My other comment was that I'm glad you took a more aggressive traffic forecast, because I think it's difficult to know what your traffic forecast will be before one knows who the occupant will be, and whether they'll be running little small shuttles back and forth to get stuff into and out of the warehouse, even though it's not a distribution center, or whether they're going to be very large tractor trailers pulling up without knowing who the tenant or tenants will be. Difficult to forecast traffic runs, so I just don't know. The other thing is there are other wells in the area, private wells in NAGOG. Actually, some of them being used by a tenant just up the road, draws a lot of water. I don't know if that's been looked at or discussed. Just saying that might be something that you may need to discuss with the Board of Health. Thanks, guys. Done.
Comments from Lou or Jeff, please?
Steve?
Yeah, well, there's a few items there. We did in fact design the stormwater system extensively around the Chapter X based on the increase in impervious, and that includes a broadening of the infiltration system to handle that stormwater. In terms of the well areas, we did address the water balance calculations, and the site itself is within the ground floor water protection district. So we believe we're well away from the any impacts from the wells. And again, because of the way the site's designed, infiltration will be handled after an extensive treatment train. So we are in fact going to be treating the water extensively with different BMPs prior to discharge of that. The traffic generation, I think there was a question about traffic generation. And as you pointed out, we did use the more aggressive calculation again, based on what was there before. I mean, just to look at the balance of the parking alone, I mean, there were 434 spaces on site currently, and we're reducing that to 86. Granted, there's loading involved as well, but the traffic generation is going to be much lower than what we had currently shown. And I think the other question you had was related to the sanitary discharge. And as Jeff pointed out, again, we're going from an office use, and just based on a broad calculation of warehouse uses, it's dropping substantially. So there should be a much less taxing of the existing station as it stands currently. But Barry, let me know. I believe I covered all your questions, but certainly let me know if you have anything.
Yeah, you did. The only thing I'm not sure about, and it's a question, not an answer, is whether Chapter U needs to be discussed. Chapter U essentially, high level, deals with what Nippies calls illicit discharge, which can be pre or post construction. Post construction, not so worried because you're trying to deal with the stormwater, so it doesn't get into the MS4. It's basically keep the rain and the water on your parcel, which is goodness. That's what Chapter X wants. Chapter U deals with anything during construction or post, running off into the MS4.
Barry, am I correct in understanding Chapter U is that typically administered during the construction process? In other words, does the contractor obtain that permit? He's going to have to deal with dewatering and treatment of water during construction.
Yeah, the way Chapter U works, the way we wrote it in the town of Acton, rather than doing 3 different bylaws, we did 2: a Chapter U and a Chapter X. The Chapter U can deal with discharge during construction, illicit discharge, or it can deal with somebody at a car wash. In fact, it actually specifically it deals with a car wash, like students doing a car wash and the soap suds running into the MS4. I mean, it deals with things like that also. So I don't believe. It's been a while because I didn't write the regulations. I don't know if the regulations require. And I'm sorry, I don't have the answer. I don't know if the regulations require a Chapter U permit. I think they don't. I think they essentially request the Board of Health, notifying the Board of Health. I don't know if there's any permitting involved. You'd have to check with, probably have to check with Cheryl for that. I'm just not sure.
Okay, we'll evaluate that, Barry, and make sure we have the answer. We did receive some comment already from the Board of Health. There was no mention of that. There were some other issues about making sure that we didn't exceed the sewer capacity, as you mentioned. But we'll certainly evaluate that and make sure.
It's the quality of the discharge that they're looking during the construction. They basically want you to try to keep it on the construction parcel, both during and after the construction is completed.
Right. Okay. We'll definitely take a deep look into that. Again, it was nothing that jumped on our radar when we first went through the regs, but I'll ensure that we have a clear understanding and make sure we do whatever we need to do in that regard.
Great. Thanks,
Are there
guys.
further comments from citizens?
Yes, there's one more. Erica, you can unmute yourself and identify yourself.
Great. Thank you so much, David. And also, John. This is Erica Amir Lynn. Many of you know me from my other hats I wear in town, but currently I'm speaking on behalf of the Nagog Treatment Facility. I'm also a resident on Old Stonebrook in Nagog Woods. So we are a community-owned sewage treatment plant. We serve all of Nagog Park, including the property that's being discussed tonight. I'm glad I'm on the call because I can firmly confirm that we are going to be serving this property with sanitary sewer service, and that there is an allotted use for this property, and currently as proposed, this project does not exceed the allotted use. If it were to, then at that point, we and the applicant would need to consult with Mass DEP to change that number. But as it is currently planned, that's not going to be a problem for our capacity. So that's first thing. And I had a couple other comments on behalf of the board. These are largely based on our past experiences in Nagog Park. So one of them is that we have worked with other properties to work with them to have a separate water meter installed for their irrigation system. And this is something that we recommend for whoever goes into this property. We bill for sewer based on water reads. So if you only have one meter that you're using for both irrigation and your use in the building, you may be getting a sewer bill that is a lot higher than you were expecting. So like to bring that up early in the process so that you can plan ahead. I did see that there was some landscaping in the plan. I'm not sure what the irrigation plan for that is, but if you're planning to irrigate, we recommend working with the district to get a separate meter for your irrigation system. It streamlines your sewer billing and saves everybody a lot of headache when you are going, why is this bill so gigantic? So that's a heads up. And then we would also request that in general during this process that the folks associated with the development here stay in contact with the treatment facility. We have already been reached out to and had several conversations with folks associated with this development, but there may be questions you have that we can answer or send you to the right person. We want to help you. We want to make sure that you are going to have a good sewer experience. So we would say, please stay in contact with us. More is better than less. And then also, we have had a couple of negative experiences with other folks in Nagog Park in terms of unexpected water discharges. And so we were interested in knowing, will there be any Hvac system discharges into the sanitary sewer? Because that's clean water that we would need to find a separate way to bill for, and it changes our treatment process. So I guess that's a question maybe for the engineer.
Comments to Erica's questions?
Yeah, I think I would defer when you're talking the HVAC. I think I would defer to Jeff Checkaway from Calari, who would be able to talk more about building systems and also answer the question about irrigation.
Yeah, and this is Jeff Checkaway. Erica, thanks very much for your comments too. It is something that if we do pursue irrigation system, that we would in fact get I think it's sometimes called an abatement meter, so we're not being billed for the sewer usage for that irrigation. So that is in our plans on this property if it does come up. And as far as the unexpected water discharges, I don't really foresee anything other than, if we have a rooftop unit that has a condensate that drains directly to the roof, that typically would go to stormwater, but I don't foresee right now with the building that's proposed that we would have any additional sewer capacity requirement from the HVAC systems.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
David,
one more.
Okay.
Linda, please unmute yourself and identify yourself.
I have 3 questions. I'm a resident of Nagog Woods, and
Can you state your full name, please?
Linda Oneska. I live at 161 Split Rock in Nagog Woods.
Thank you.
And since it was brought up about the HVAC system, I'm wondering, will attention be paid to where the air handlers are placed? The building that is there now, I know it's a taller building, but when it's operating, it's very noisy. And this is something that we appreciate. This noise really carries, whether it's air conditioning in particular during the summer. And by placement of the air handlers or putting up sound barriers, it can really make a difference. So I hope that's taken into consideration. My other question was about, is it known if there's any asbestos in the building that's there? And if so, in taking it down, will the appropriate ameliorations occur, with that? Because I know it can be an issue. I know the building has been there for a while. I've lived in Nagog a long time. So I just hope that's paid attention to. And my third question has to do with, I know this has happened around here before, if there are large trucks that are delivering to a warehouse, they tend to idle. Sometimes they stay there all night. Sometimes the drivers kind of rest there. How do we keep that from happening? Because then I think it really changes the intent of having a warehouse if it really gets to be that kind of environment. I know with trying to think of the name of the company that's been in there, they had large trucks there. Some of them were off the trailers in there. But I think in past years ago, I know there would be trucks there idling for a while. And if you've ever been around a diesel truck, that is just there. It's it's not a good thing to want to be close to that. So those are my three concerns at this point in time. Thank you.
Is there a response from Jeff or Lou?
Yeah, I can respond, Lou, if that's okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jeff, please.
So, in answer to your first question, consideration is taken on the location of the HVAC equipment. Typically, we don't locate it. If it's on the roof with the type of structure we're looking at, it's likely it would be a roof-mounted system. But they're not placed along the perimeter. They're placed sort of inward of the edges, so you're limiting the amount of sound and visual interference, I guess, that can be caused. With regard to the asbestos question, there is a small amount of asbestos that is almost completed, and we filed with the state of Massachusetts appropriately to do so, and we're following all the required safety precautions and measures, and we'll have a full, final air clearances and all the information required to receive the demo permit. That all the asbestos was closed out properly. And then the final question regarding the truck idling. I believe in Massachusetts there's a law that doesn't allow idling to take place for the large trucks, and we'd certainly be making sure that the tenants are following that requirement.
Are there any further citizen comments or questions?
No more, John.
Okay, are there any further comments or questions from board members? Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to close the loop on the master plan question. So to summarize what I heard from people, there aren't any concerns about adherence to the master plan that would rise to the level of concern for this particular project. I just did want to make clear that the clear language of the zoning law includes adherence to the master plan, not just the zoning, but the master plan for any site plan special permit, whether it's a use permit or just a plain site plan special permit. So it is appropriate for us to be considering, whether this advances the purposes set forth in this case the Acton 2020 plan. So I'm glad I asked the question. I'm glad I got the feedback. But it's not an item that's going to hold me up for the future. The other comment I wanted to make was just in relation to another part of the master plan about environmental goals. Again, this is nothing that this is nothing that can be made a condition. This is just a request that you take a look at some energy options. There are awesome incentives for both solar carports and solar panels on your roof. So if you're thinking about the design of your roof to keep it, relatively clear of obstacles so that you can have solar panels up there. The other piece I'd ask you to take a look at would be to run the numbers and see if a ground source heat pump would provide you with the heating and cooling that you need, so you wouldn't need to use the gas line that's there. One of the goals that Acton has is to make a transition away from fossil fuels. And one key way to do that in both commercial and residential places is to use heat pumps for heating and cooling. I know in a building of that size, an air source heat pump is probably not going to be economically viable compared to a high efficiency gas system. But a ground source heat pump, on the other hand, if the conditions are appropriate, could pay back. This is the analysis that came forward when we did plan the new fire station and when we planned the new school, that a ground source heat pump system, while requiring a bigger investment up front, was going to pay back. It was going to pay back in a reasonable amount of time. Thanks.
Any response from Jeff or Lou to Jim's comments?
No.
Okay, so in terms of a timeline on this, I get the sense that the board would be inclined to grant the permit with conditions. We don't know exactly yet what the conditions are. Roland is leaving on the 28th. Our next scheduled meeting is 2 weeks from tonight on the 20th. Lou and John M., would we be able to get a draft order with conditions to the board with the packet that would go out ahead of the July 20 meeting, so we could see them that weekend ahead and be prepared to review the conditions at our meeting on the 20th and hopefully vote that evening?
Yes.
Well, I see we have, I will do my best to provide a draft decision. Do a little bit of that, Roland? Okay, so does Lou, does that work for you?
That would be great. That works for the board, and takes care of Mr. Martin's concerns. And if leave the meeting open, if we have any questions about the conditions to discuss with the board, and you can close the meeting on the 20th and vote. Yeah, that would be great. I thank very much, Mr. Benson.
Okay, so we will then continue this hearing to Monday, August 20th. We'll say 7:10 p.m.
Thank you.
Are we good with that? July 20th, I'm sorry.
Do we need a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I move that we continue the hearing until July 20th.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? John?
At a time at 7:10 p.m.?
Yes.
Can I offer a friendly amendment for that?
Yeah.
Friendly amendment?
Okay.
Okay. Then, David, would you call the roll?
Sure. Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
Mr. Martin, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, so the
Thank you
hearing's
very much.
continued until Monday, July 20th at 7:10 p.m. John? You're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to look at the calendar before you voted. We do have something else scheduled for 7:10 that night, but I believe it will be quick, so I don't think it's an issue unless you do.
No.
Okay.
So is it necessary to revote to make it at 7:20? Be on this.
Probably.
Why don't we,
I amend my motion to be 7:20.
Sorry.
So we probably should vote that again.
okay, so is there a second to the amended motion then?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Martin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Gardner.
Yes, aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
Mr. Martin, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
So our next item would be update on best practice areas under the Community Compact Best Practices Program.
John?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just before we move too far, I've got two items that I need to bring up. They're not on the agenda, but they did come up very recently. So maybe when we're done with this next item, I'd like to address them.
Okay, sure. John.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. So for the best practices discussion, I just wanted to follow up. A few meetings ago, the board voted 2 new best practices under the Commonwealth's best practices program, one related to capital planning under financial management, and another one related to development of a climate action plan under sustainability and environmental measures. I'm pleased to report that the state, on the last day of the fiscal year, funded us with the grant to help with both of those efforts. $5,000 towards the development of a 10-year capital plan and $35,000 towards the creation of a climate action plan. So The next steps for both of those projects will be, we have 2 years to spend the money, which is nice. Hopefully we won't need 2 years though. The capital improvement planning study, I hope to kick off in early August, and we're still working on what the next steps are with the climate action plan. But I wanted to ask the board, is there part of the work that we'll be doing on the capital plan is to be developing some what it's going to look like next year and what to present to town meeting. So I was thinking that we should ask for a liaison from the board and also from the finance committee to just keep have someone to contact directly with as this project moves forward. So I would ask the board that tonight, or we can talk about it another time.
That would be for the capital planning.
For both, but the
For
capital.
both, okay. So, well, let me suggest Jim for the climate action plan and Dean for the capital plan. Make sense? Good.
So thank you, and thanks to the state for their support and helping us doing some things locally that are our priority. That was it on that. Thank you.
Great. Dean, you had 2 matters?
Yeah, the first one, it kind of fits in nicely with this action we just took. I noticed from one of the town manager's updates that they've starting a feasibility study for the public works facility. And I was going to ask that I be looped into that and get involved in that. It's a point of particular concern for me. And now that I'm going to be the guy when it comes to the capital plan, I think it fits in very nicely. So, John, if you can just make sure that I get updated on that and find out when the meetings are or site walks or whatever, I'd like to get involved in that.
Okay.
Good.
A lot of quality time in that building during my career. So that's one. The other item was a situation that has arisen. I became aware of it in my role as liaison to the Conservation Commission. The school department, the school district began work on the Douglas and Gates project. And last week, they went in and without any permits and actually against the specific instructions of the Conservation Commission, they stripped and cleared 1.7 acres of wetlands resource. I actually accompanied the Conservation Commissioners on a site walk and met with their engineers from the construction company today to kind of get up to speed on it. A lot of this area was area that eventually probably would have been disturbed because it encompasses a lot of the areas where the ground source heat pumps are going to be. But it's maddening that the schools sold this as being a green project. And practically the first thing they did was violate the Wetlands Protection Act and the Wetlands Protection Bylaw. And the other thing that I found unsettling was that we met with engineers and the owner's project manager, but there was no representatives there from the school district. If they're going to talk the talk, they have to walk the walk. And I'm very disturbed, and I'm sure other people on the board are, that, if this was any private project, there'd be helicopters circling overhead. So I think I'd like to, and I think there'll probably be a way forward from this, but I'd like to make sure that the town manager stays on top of this. I'd like to get some kind of report from people in authority in the school district that they actually take this seriously and that they're not just, hanging out a couple of engineers and contractors out to dry. The other thing that was discussed there is that part of the area was not stripped, and the reason it was not stripped is because a goodly portion of the area that had been used for play fields is contaminated with arsenic, which is going to have to be mitigated. I guess they got a plan in place. They've got a licensed site professional there. But, you know, there's another environmental issue that's coming up with this project. And, you know, basically they've been on site about a month. Third item that is also unsettling is that they chose to site all of their construction trailers on a basketball court, which was paid for by community preservation funds. And all of these items, none of them were addressed. There was no outreach that I'm aware of from the school district to the town, to either the selectmen, the town manager, the conservation commission. And I think it just shows a real failure of leadership on the part of the folks over there in the school district. And I want to make sure that they know that at least I'm very upset about this. Thank you.
David?
Yeah, I did hear the superintendent speak at the last school committee meeting. He was definitely taking these things seriously, but I completely agree with Dean that someone from the district needs to be more involved here, whether it's JD or I don't know whoever they designate. You know, there needs to be more involvement. And I have a question on the basketball courts. I thought that piece of property there, and well, I haven't gone over and seen it myself, but I know that there's one piece of property there that's town-owned. Are these construction trailers on the town property? And if they're on the town property, did we give them a construction easement or something? What is the situation there?
I believe that that those basketball courts are actually on school district territory. So they were probably okay when they did that, but the fact that, and the Community Preservation Committee folks are really unhappy about this. The fact that this was done, there was a considerable amount of money involved on the part of the town on that joint town and school district project. And you know, if they had to do it and they couldn't make any other arrangements, that's one thing. But if they could have at least reached out to folks and let them know what's going on, as opposed to just showing up and doing this, that's the real stumbling block that I see there.
David?
Yeah, sorry, just one more comment. You guys all may have heard these comments, but now from a couple of places I've heard complaints by students that they can't play basketball there anymore. And there's, you know, their activities are already pretty restricted with the pandemic. And they used to, play, just a little bit, shooting baskets, and now they can't do that. I mean, maybe there's no other place for the trailers and stuff, but in addition to the CPC concerns, I mean, I think there's concerns about having the youth be able to have a place that they can go as well. Thank you.
Is Jim?
I will send to the board some information from an exchange between JD and Walter Foster of the CPC on this topic. It has more information and background if we want to follow up on it. There actually is one of the two basketball courts is actually still available. It's the one that's closest to the street that's been covered. Plus, the whole little ball field that's next to it, between there and the school.
Will the farmers market be able to operate, Dean?
Yeah, that's there's not been any intrusion in that. The farmers market, I believe, is going to be sort of wrapped around the tennis courts, and those will still be available, at least as we speak right now.
Is there any sense that one of us or Dean should appear at the next school committee meeting and voice these concerns, or have they been conveyed from John to Peter Light?
I did talk to Peter this morning, and because Dean had contacted me over the weekend with this concern, and I wanted to make sure that I understood what was going on, and it was something that he indicated was a mistake, and it was due to a miscommunication with the project team. And the site walk today I did not attend, but I understand it went well, and there's another meeting of the Conservation Commission's planned for next week to look further at this issue. I did tell Peter that this is something that was upsetting to hear about. I'm happy to continue discussing with him if that's helpful.
Does that satisfy board members?
If you think that I should, I can voice these concerns at the next school committee meeting as well. I attend almost all.
Yeah, I would appreciate that you do that. Dean, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to observe that further on, and I believe we were talking about making an assignment of a selectman onto the school building committee. And I think that person is probably the appropriate one to keep an eye on things going forward and representing the town's interests here.
Yeah, I think most of the job now is monitoring and making sure it goes according to plan.
Well, what Dean's concerns here are part of monitoring. I mean, I'm happy to be the liaison to the school building committee. Last year, I attended all the school building committee meetings. I have not attended them all this year, but I'm pretty familiar with the project.
Okay, so I was going to address that when we talked about selectmen appointments to Health Insurance Trust and River Street, and wanted to add the school building committee as well.
Sure, that's fine.
We'll be getting up to that. So anything further, Dean?
All set, thank you.
Okay, so our next discussion was updates and discussion regarding COVID-19 pandemic from John.
Thank you. The update for today, unfortunately, I did get confirmation from Heather that we have three new cases today. We had a good streak of over a week, and since June 9th, we haven't had many new cases, but as of today, we have three, which brings our total up to 176 throughout the whole pandemic. So we're going to continue to monitor that, and we'll report out to the community on where we are with that situation. The state Governor Baker announced step 1 of phase 3 as effective today, which means that movie theaters, outdoor performance venues, museums, fitness centers, certain recreational activities, professional sports, and other things will be allowed today still with restrictions in place. For example, even though you can start playing baseball games tomorrow, there are still things you need to do to make sure you're doing it safely. And there's several other measures that our health folks are working very hard to communicate to the public and our business community so that we can safely begin this new phase of the reopening as the Commonwealth has laid out the phases. And that brings me to something that we've been talking about internally that I wanted to reach out tonight with the board and get some initial feedback on reopening. As you know, the building's been closed to the public since March 13th. I think we've been doing a great job of providing services without having people enter the building. I haven't received many complaints from people or residents saying, I wish I could come into town hall. For the most part, everything that people have needed, we've been able to accommodate either by meeting them in the parking lot or just doing it online. But I wanted to just ask the board if there's any sense that you all have about if you want us to start being open sooner, or if you want to continue working through the next few weeks and keep playing a week.
Comments from?
I'd say let's continue as is until we see how this next phase works.
David?
I don't have a problem staying as is. I mean, I think that the health of both our employees and the public is paramount. And if we don't have a need here, if we're not doing anything inhibited in any way, I don't see the pressure. You know, if John Mangiarotti sees some things that you know, really need town hall or another building to be done better, that's a little different story in my mind. I also feel that as we get into the, you know, we've heard of it just over the weekend and late last week about the possibility that this the virus can be become an aerosol, and so if that's the case, that will happen more in drier weather. And so, spread could go up in the, in the cool, dry fall. So anyway, just comments.
Anything further? Jim? Okay. Further updates, John?
No.
Okay. So we'll just keep status quo on town hall.
Mhm.
That's good. The next item was to discuss the small business grant program next steps. John?
Yes, so thank you. This program is something that we were really excited about. We've come into some obstacles with the funding source, and at this point, we're reaching some dead ends. So just to lay it out for everyone, we had initially proposed to use CARES Act funding to fund small business grants. We've administered a grant program. We've got some 44 businesses applied. We selected 25 initially as those that were eligible and were to be awarded these grants of up to $4,000. This funding through the CARES Act is allowed for under federal guidance that we received from the federal treasury. However, the state, the Commonwealth, is charged with distributing the CARES Act funds. And they have certain rules that they've put in place for how each community may use the funds. In our case, we have just under 2.1 million available to us. And the board had approved using 100,000 of that for this program. And the state has clarified that they're not allowing us to do that, which puts us in a difficult position, because I think there are a lot of businesses, obviously, that were counting on that support, and we were very eager to provide that support. So I think the board at this point in the town, I think we have a few options in front of us. One is we can try to find other ways to help our businesses and apologize for what happened, and try to find other ways to help them, as we have been doing. The other option is we could consider bringing a request to town meeting to fund the program. And there are other things that we're continuing to evaluate, but it's something that we announced the grants on June 19th and found out the very next day this issue, and we've been working very hard. Town council is doing a great job trying to push things at the state level, and we've gotten a very clear answer now that it's no. And so we're at the point now where we need to talk about next steps. We don't have to decide tonight, but I just wanted to sort of lay that out to the board so that we can start thinking about how we want to move forward.
From the memo that the email you forwarded from Anita Pickering Cook about 6 o'clock this evening, she said we can take the program and use town revenues to fund it, provided it is approved by town meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, so our legislative body, being town meeting, could appropriate money. Short of that, I think there was some concerns about using general funds otherwise. I think if there was an appropriation from our legislative body, there'd be a level of comfort with that being allowable.
Yeah, the selectmen just couldn't authorize it and say, we're going to take $100,000 and apply the monies to the grant program. That, she said, we clearly can't do.
Right, we looked at that option in several ways, and our auditors and our council are not comfortable with that.
Okay, so the avenue would be an article before town meeting to appropriate X dollars for the grant program and explain the grant program, and if town meeting approves it, that should pass muster and not be subject to citizen challenge via the courts.
It still may be challenged, but I think council feels more comfortable
Will prevail
with that.
So we are looking at a town meeting sometime in September, assuming the Piper Lane acquisition moves through the CPC process. So we could put it on that. I mean, it somewhat defeats the purpose because we were trying to get the money out as quickly as they can because businesses need the money post haste. Joan?
Yeah, John, do we still have the grant money for other purposes?
So we have we had just over $2 million that we were made available to us. We've submitted a request to have them released to us just under 400,000. That request was held up because the 100,000 that we asked for related to the small business grants, they deemed to be ineligible. So we can find another request for that 100,000, or we can just reduce what we've asked them to release to us in the meantime, as we continue to work on several things over the next few months on how we're going to react to the COVID response and find other ways to leverage that CARES Act money.
But it's clear we can't use the CARES Act money for the grant program. That they've said no to. SATA said no to that.
Yes, we've asked that in many different ways. Yes, we were not able to do that.
Comments from David?
Yeah, so I mean, I think as far as the September town meeting, we should wait to make a decision until sometime in August as to whether we'd want to propose an article on that town meeting. One reason for that is, Congress is still in session to the end of the month. Who knows what they're going to pass as extensions or changes or additional funding. So we should go from there. I also have a related question. At one point, we were considering lessening the liquor license fees for restaurants that were unable to sell alcohol. Are we doing that? Can we continue to do that? I just forget where we ended up with there.
That's a question that we're still looking at. We haven't received any payments that we can discount lately, but it's something that we asked for clarification on whether we can either A, refund the calendar year 2020 fees in some way, or B, reduce what's owed for the next calendar year. And we should have that information soon.
Yeah, we had gotten a letter from the owner, I think, of an Indian restaurant who had written us in May and again over the weekend. Have we taken any action yet? So could we have an answer and a plan for our July 20 meeting?
We can have an answer. We have an answer to that question. That question from the Indian restaurant is a little different. That was, can we suspend our license and get paid back? But it's the same concept.
The same idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what I had gotten a question the other night. Could we do it prospectively? From July 1 forward, and that may seem to be a more practical way of dealing with it. So if we could put this on for July 20 and as to whether prospectively we can reduce liquor license fees for the current fiscal year, as opposed to trying to figure out about refunding monies. It just may be more practical and cleaner. Further comments from board members? Jim?
You mentioned a 6 o'clock memo from John or from town council. Maybe it didn't get to me, or maybe I've missed it somehow.
I just forwarded it to you. It was responding to a question that John had asked me directly, so I sent it to him only, but I sent it to the whole board just a few minutes ago.
Great, thank you.
It was the bottom line answer was what we had discussed, that we could use general revenues so long as town meeting as the town's legislative body would approve that use. So the next item would be discuss residences at Kelly's Corner pilot agreement.
Yes, thank you. So this is a project that is, the board's familiar with. It's a common ground project. Steve Jonkis is running the project. It's to build 31 units for seniors 62 and over, and also for disabled adults. The project was submitted for funding 3 rounds now, and it hasn't been able to get the funding, which is unfortunate. They are submitting again for a mini round next month, and they were looking to the town to see if it would agree to a pilot agreement. And a pilot agreement would be a payment in lieu of taxes over a period of time, in this case 20 years. And the purpose for that is to provide a stable and predictable expense for their balance sheet to allow them to focus on serving the residents that they are serving. The pilot would, just a little details about the property. It's again 31 one-bedroom units. They're just under 700 square feet each. The rents will be restricted to 60% of area median income. And the rent restriction is in perpetuity. And this limits the cash flow of the operation. And so we looked at this with Brian, our assessor, and he looked at some of the numbers. And I've talked to Nancy Tavernier about it. And I'd like to have Steve Jonkis here to make a presentation to the board. And I'd also like to have a sample or a draft of a pilot agreement for you to see. And I don't have either of those things tonight. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to outline the project and to see if there's any initial questions that you have as we prepare to bring this back to you on that same night, July 20th. It's shaping up to be good.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Jim? Dean? Would you mind if we just took a 2-minute break now before we go to the next item? Okay?
Okay.
Hold on.
You're still muted, John.
All right.
That was very civilized. Thank you for giving us a 2-minute break.
Old guys. So the next item would be to discuss selectmen appointments to the Health Insurance Trust in 53 River Street. And I would add to that the School Building Committee. The Health Insurance Trust and 53 River Street are where we've in creating those committees. The selectmen have a specific representative who serves on those committees. Peter Berry was our representative to both those groups. He approached David to succeed him on River Street and myself on the Health Insurance Trust, and I've gone to several of those meetings. They meet monthly since March. So I am happy to take on the Health Insurance Trust. David is prepared to take on 53 River Street. And if that's okay with the board, I don't think we need to necessarily take a vote on it. David and I will serve in those respective capacities. With respect to the school building committee, when I was talking to Peter earlier today, he said there's no specific school a selectman designated seat on the committee. He had just applied for it. They said, gee, it'd be great to have a selectman. So, I think we should still, hold that seat. David Martin is willing to fill that role. He has been our representative to the school committee, so I think it's just a natural fit. So would that be okay with the group? Okay.
I think that Peter had an interest of remaining on that committee as well.
Yeah, he is going to approach the building committee because there are several just at-large seats, so to speak, that are vacant, and he wanted to continue on. And I said, do you anticipate any problem finding a seat for yourself? And he goes, no, so he'll be all set.
John, I had a question. It seemed like with 53 River Street and the Health Insurance Trust, if these are actual committee appointments rather than liaison positions, that
they're members of the committee, yes.
Yeah, so that seems like that would be a vote thing, because don't we vote to approve all the committee appointments?
Okay, so
I move that we appoint John Benson to the Health Insurance Trust and David Martin to the 53 River Street Master Plan Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, David, would you kindly call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Senator Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
Mr. Martin? Aye. Unanimous.
Okay. So our next item would be the town manager performance review. Let's begin. We received over the weekend Marion Fleckner's table breaking out the ratings to each of the categories. There were comments made by members as part of the evaluation form. Peter Berry and I prepared addendums for our, more narrative comments. Peter, are you with us now?
I can allow Peter to talk on.
Oh, please. Okay. Since Peter participated in the evaluation, I think it's appropriate that he join in the performance review. Yeah. And certainly, Jim, as a new member, you can join in as well, although you didn't participate in the evaluation. Generally speaking, we gave John, very high and well-deserved grades for his performance. So I'd like to go around and ask each of you to amplify on your ratings and your comments and narratives. And let's begin with Joan.
Well, I served 9 years previously, and now this is my second term here. So I've served with a number of different town managers. And I must say, John is off the top. He has done well with the normal course of business for the town. But when we were hit with COVID and town meeting planning, I think he has done an extraordinary job and managed to keep his sense of humor.
Okay, Dean?
Well, this is my first run through as a selectman evaluating a town manager. It's kind of nice to see turn the tables on these guys. I worked with, I believe, 6 different managers in my career, and everybody had their strengths and their weaknesses. I've been delighted with working with John. He certainly brought a lot of vigor to the job. There's certainly been a remarkable change just in the approach to the job from some previous managers, and I give him high praise. And certainly, what's happened over the last 6 months have been really challenging, and he's certainly risen to that. It's nice to have somebody that's youthful and enthusiastic to drag us selectmen around. So I would give him very high marks, and I did so in the evaluation.
Thank you, David.
Yes, I find John to be extremely effective and productive. He gets done just an enormous number of things. The fact that the priority list from the board, to the extent to which it gets addressed, is really quite impressive. Money management is excellent in terms of staying within budgeted limits and coming in well under those limits. Also, I think it's noteworthy of John's consideration and accommodation for all the citizens of the town, and very concerned about everyone's needs and concerns. It's been quite notable, I think. And finally, the COVID-19 situation, the Java with John and the other communication mechanisms, that the hotline, other things that have been set in place, just really good. Thank you.
Peter?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I also, I gave John a lower grade than the other selectmen, very good as opposed to outstanding. That reflects my general belief that there's always room for improvement, and nobody is completely excellent in every part of their performance, but I certainly think that John has been well received. I've been very impressed with his work. He is a relatively new town manager and relatively young, so he's got things to learn, and he is committed to doing that and educating himself where he thinks he needs some new knowledge. I am very impressed with John's money management skills, his budgeting skills, certainly top priority for a town manager. He has taken the goals of the selectmen seriously and found ways, for instance, in the sustainability area, to put together a group working on those issues and find ways to fund it, and continuing to take the lead on that and try to make sure that goal is moved forward. So I'm very impressed with John. I think he has been well accepted in town. particularly with the senior center, where he spends a lot of time, and I think has been greatly appreciated for his interactions with the seniors in town. So the one area I've had concern with is John's understanding of the role of the town manager versus the board of selectmen. I cite several areas of concern in my evaluation. The first one was when we had the arrest incident in the Miriam School, which caused a lot of concern in the community, and this community information session that took place at the high school. John went ahead and with town council retained an independent investigator. I'm not sure how much interaction John had with the chair before that happened, but I was not made aware of it before it happened. And once the board learned of that, we decided to go in a different direction. That's just an example of the relationship of the Board of Selectmen to the town. That's the kind of policy decision which I think the board is properly charged with making. And so other areas where I felt John could have had input from the selectmen before making decisions were his decision to shut down town hall and his decision to stop all board meetings. I think John has done a great job. Very impressed with the way he's responded to the COVID crisis. He has generated real leadership and confidence in, I think, the town in its management of that. I did comment that that's probably the most challenging thing that John will have to deal with throughout his whole career as a town manager. But I do think that those types of decisions, and this is very important to me, that that affect the entire community and how town operations are taken forward on a wider basis or a broader basis, are selectmen's decisions. You can call special meetings on an emergency basis under the open meeting law to deal with those issues. So, and also some public relations issues. It's kind of a new phenomena that I've seen where towns have been hiring public relations firms to put out responses or notifications of important things that are happening in town, which is fine. But on an issue like how the town responds or what the town's position is on an issue as important as Black Lives Matter and the whole issues of race relations, to me, that again is something the Board of Selectmen ought to be putting out, issues, our position on those issues. I agree completely with the comments that came out from John and the chief, but really the selectmen are the municipal managers of the town. We're the leaders in the town, and those major policy issues should come from the Board of Selectmen rather than the staff. An announcement that the police department has revised its use of force policy to meet all 8 guidelines. That's fine coming from staff, but something much more important about how the town feels about race relations and what we're going to do about it, I think needs to be run by the Board of Selectmen before it gets put out there. It can come from the selectmen and the staff, but I feel pretty strongly about that. But that's an area where John can continue to work with the board and continue to grow. And I gave him very high marks. I think the town's lucky to have him. John's a rising star. He'll be a leader, not just in town but across the state in the MMA operations Other areas I'm impressed with, for instance, enjoying the 495 partnership. And I think that will provide great benefits to both John and the town. So, good job.
Jim, do you have anything?
Well, nothing new. I'm very comfortable with both the positive and negative things that have been said. I mean, I have less experience with John than you do, but I think he's doing a great job.
I can't, if you speak louder,
Yeah, how's that?
that's much better.
Okay, good. I think the only thing I would add is just that in the long run, I think John's going to, especially through this COVID crisis, but even before, John works at 110%, which is not sustainable for years and years. So I'd encourage him to find a way to, model a work-life balance for, the rest of the senior staff as well. Take some Saturdays off. Geez, thanks.
Well, as I said in the narrative I wrote, the most important vote I made during my 2+ years on the select board was my first vote. And that was offering the town manager's job to John in April of 2018. He was going to be a first-time manager. He, brought in a wealth of experience of 6 years as a deputy town manager in 2 quality towns, and he has proved to be, just really an excellent, operations manager. And I want him here for many, many more years to come, and hopefully Acton's his last stop before retirement. Peter and I, shared a view that about, and it's this intersection between the selectman and the manager. The town charter charges the selectman with policy, goal setting, and planning, and the manager with the day-to-day, operations of the town. But there are many issues, that come up that fall between the two. And the thing that got Peter and I, both concerned was learning at a town forum on January 30th that a special investigator was appointed to investigate, an outside investigator to investigate the police actions on January 9th, and who was appointed. And we both looked at each other, and we almost rocketed out of our seats. That's a job for the selectmen, to do. You may make a recommendation to us. Let's go outside. But I was, critical of Nina, who I think the world of. That job did not belong within the investigator. Should not have been someone in her firm. That was plainly a conflict. The same firm can't advise us on one level and simultaneously be investigating us. But it led to a great resolution. But there are areas like that that are that fall to us as the executive body of the town. I would agree with Peter that the statement that John had prepared by the outside public relations group that he and the chief issued together with the police chief and manager in Boxborough is good. But that statement should have come from the board and John and and the chief. That's a policy statement. I think this is something we've been working on. I know in Andover, where John was for 2 years, that the manager and town staff take charge of town meeting, and they present the articles. Whether it's the budget or Bear Kelly's Corner or capital budgets. Here we do it differently, where the where the selectmen take the lead, and and do the presenting, and that's a tradition we're going to keep. But I think where we could do things a lot better, and John and I have had a number of discussions about this, is we have we've always had talented select boards with very capable people, with varied interests. And on major projects like the Kelly's Corner infrastructure, the North Acton fire station, the redevelopment of the Kmart parcel, selectmen, really need to, be a face of the town, and how those, proposals are developed and presented, particularly in handling the outreach, because in the 2 years I've been on the board, we've I took it on that outreach was really crucial, and you saw that at the town meeting votes. When we came back last year on infrastructure, it was 89% vote. The vote on the fire station was 88%. This last round for the land acquisitions was well over 90%, and that's a credit to all of us, and it's a credit to John and town staff, and I think working together and combining efforts, we can make a real big difference. So at a future meeting, I would sort of like to have a greater discussion and as to what guidelines we might want to put in place for those areas that fall between the two. But let's think about that. The other area that I didn't touch on in my narrative, John and I have had a number of discussions. I'm just raising it, and I want everyone, and John and board members to think about it. It's really access to town staff, and John would like to see requests for information to go through him, and he'll get us the information. Sometimes, for the most part, it goes okay, but there are times that I just need questions answered, and I would go to Steve Barrett, or I'd go to Selby, and I think many of you are probably in similar situations that, John doesn't need goes to what Jim said about, not doing this 24/7, where we could develop, some sort of guidelines on information requests. Could we do that? As long as John's copied. It's just an exchange of information. It's questions to be answered. As I think, as Jim's going to find, the next year is going to be a real, learning curve for him in operations. I'm not suggesting that, any request, if we're looking for research or help on a project, that's really got to go through John in terms of him managing his people. But it's just, gaining access to information where I don't want John to be, tied up in things that he doesn't have to be, or create more loops in the process where a request could be made, John's copied, the request comes back, he's copied. I think that saves time and it makes for smoother things. But we can talk about that in the weeks ahead. But John, thank you so much for accepting the offer. 2+ years ago, and it's great to have you here, and I hope this is your last stop. So, anything else? So, we have the consent items to do. Then we have an executive session on John's contract. We do need to have a goals meeting, because John's just set to go on goals 2020. Typically, we have a separate meeting dedicated to that. It's not part of the normal meeting. I think we have things largely under control, and we don't have to have another regular board meeting until July 20th. So would people be interested in meeting next Monday night to have our goal set meeting? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Dean, David, Jim?
Sure.
Thumbs up? So did you, I don't know if the Board of Health is going to meet at 7 o'clock that night. They typically meet on the off Mondays, on Mondays 2nd and 4. So if we met at 5 o'clock, simply for a goal setting meeting next Monday night, would that work for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, Dean, Jim, David? Okay, and I'm going to reach out to each of you individually on Liaison. What?
Reaching out to each of us individually.
I don't think
it's not a matter that comes before the board.
as liaison, that is a matter that comes before the board.
No, all I'm talking about is liaison assignments. I mean, historically, what I'm just asking people for is I want to fill up Jim's plate. Peter, I mean, typically he would pick up the assignments that Peter had. 3 of them were reassigned to other selectmen tonight. So what I was looking for, not in a group conversation, would be, are there any committees that any of you might be willing to give up that may be offered to Jim?
So
I don't see a problem with that.
I think we can do that in a group conversation.
All right, would you rather do it that way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because typically, I know when I came on the board, I had Ching Sung's assignments, which were only a few committees. And I had met with Katie, and she said, why don't you speak to other members if they'd be interested in giving anything up? So, Jim could, do it that way. Or if you'd rather do it at a meeting, we could start off the goal-setting meeting with a discussion of committee assignments.
I think that's much safer.
Yeah, and in the meantime, if Jim is, particularly interested in the committee, he could contact the current liaison.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of the same thing. Jim?
Yeah, I have prepared a list of committees I'd love to be the liaison to, so I'm happy to individually contact board members on those particular committees to have a short conversation. That might help the liaison conversation.
Okay, so maybe we could do, Dean?
Yeah, if we could have the town manager or his staff send out the full list of all the committees and the present assignments, because I know that even during the course of the year, things have changed. So if we could get that, so we'd have a worksheet to prepare for, that'd be great.
All right, well, do you have a problem if Jim reaches out to board members individually?
I think we should do it in committee.
All right, so why don't we do this for next Monday night, have a 2-part meeting. Let's start with liaison assignments first and then go into goal setting. And that'll start at 5 o'clock then.
Okay, that sounds good.
Dean, okay, everyone on board?
Yeah, just
okay. Okay, so let's work through the consent items. So I will read them. Consent item 11, approve meeting minutes June 1, 8, and 26 of 2020. Consent item 12, accept gift Acton Police Department from June Wong for $100 to support community outreach programs. 13, accept gift Council on Aging from Paul and Patricia Matica for $150 towards Council of Aging gift fund. 14, accept gift Council on Aging from Audubon Hill Condo Association for $100 in memory of Angeline Kahn towards the Council on Aging Gift Fund. 15 one-day alcoholic beverage license, Boston events, multiple dates, outdoor concerts, Nara Park. 16 Board of Registrars reappointment, David Lunger, term to expire June 30, 2023. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Can't do that.
David, would you just call the roll? I'm sorry.
Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Carter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
Mr. Martin. Aye. Unanimous.
Okay.
Just
So
add
the next.
Before we
Jim?
go on to the next thing, I just had one question. Back to the goal setting meeting. When I think about it, it seems like one of the critical things that we do, because it, as we've learned, it sets John and the staff into motion for the next year or more. So if there's anything that either John or John could say about the format of that meeting or the preparation that's appropriate or anything, I'd love to be prepared.
Well, okay, we deal in goals that are short-term, meaning items that we could resolve in the next year. Like this past year, it was the Kelly's Corner land acquisitions. It was the North Acton Fire Station. The second are long-term goals, things to work on over, 3 and 4 years. So I would try to think about it that way. And as we've done it in the past, people, let's deal with short-term goals first. Okay, go around the room. What do you have as a short-term goal? And we discuss and sort of winnow out, and then take a vote on what's your top short-term, second, third, fourth, and tend to be more short-term goals than long-term goals. But it could vary. David?
So the voting is weighted. So you or typically it's traditionally been weighted, so you can put all your votes into a single thing, which would likely get it on the list, or you can distribute your votes across a number of items. You have a choice there. Perhaps, Jim Mangiarotti, you could send out also with a list of committee assignments the goals for last year, just so Jim gets a flavor of the kind of things that we had last year.
I actually, I'll happily send out a list I prepared of short and long-term goals for the last 4 years, because I was trying to be prepared for this event. But we can all get refamiliarized with them. The other comment I had about the process was, David, the way you described it, it seemed like we could end up with a short-term goal that only one selectman thought was important and the other selectman thought was not important. Which is unfortunate to be able. I'd love to be able to set John off on my personal project, but it seems like we'd be better served if we had some kind of ranked choice voting process or something that would prevent, that would at least encourage having goals that John spends his time on, that maybe 2 of us support, or even 3 of us. Just a thought.
The weighted vote produces that.
Okay, good. I thought David was saying that one could put all of one's eggs in one basket and sort of get your way, if you're willing to give up on all your other goals.
Well, I think both of those things might be true. I think that if in the weighted voting in the past, you could put all your votes in one place and get what you want, but then you don't get to vote on anything else. Mm-hmm. I forget exactly how it worked. And last year, which we can't do this time, Mark Hall brought a set of clickers that are similar to, but different than the town meeting clickers that we used for the vote. I think maybe this time we could vote through the chat.
Any other question, Jim?
No, if I have any other thoughts about it, I'll send them to you and John.
Okay. Okay, so there will be a need for an executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, in this case, town manager under purpose 2. I will ask the board for a motion to enter into executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel, town manager under purpose 2.
Don't we have to adjourn this meeting?
No, we adjourned.
No, we're coming back into this meeting. No.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
Mr. Martin, aye. It stands. We're now in executive session.
Okay, I just want to say at the conclusion of the executive session, the board will reconvene an open session only to adjourn.
Well, we still have somebody on.
Yeah,
Would-
I'll get them.
All right, would you mind if would it be okay? I don't think there's anything illegal or inappropriate about it. If Peter Berry would join us in the executive session.
Yes, but Tara is on.
Yeah, so actually, all the attendees, please disconnect, or I will disconnect.